Fresh is the word.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Fresh is the Word podcast. I'm your host, Kelly K. Fresh Frazier. And like always, we have the freshest of guests for you. And on this episode, we have Norelle and Matthew Green of the Philadelphia-based indie punk band Stud Count. They just released their debut self-titled album this summer via Smart Punk Records. We chat about the making of the album, doing a project that sounds different from their hardcore scene roots, and much, much more. So, without further ado, let's get into this interview with Norelle and Matthew Green of Stud Count. Hey, how's it going? How you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
Doing all right. I'm doing all right, man. Thanks for taking the time out to do this interview. Took a couple times to do it, but good to go now.
Right?
Cool. Introduce yourselves real quickly.
I'm Norelle, the vocalist of Stud Count.
And I'm Matthew, the guitarist of Stud Count.
All right, Matthew Noel. I just want to welcome everybody to the Fresh is the Word podcast, live podcast here on Twitch TV. And like they already mentioned, this is the Philly-based punk rock group Stud Count. They got their self-titled album coming out on July 22nd. I've heard the whole thing. It's really great. Glad to have them with me. Thank you for being on the Fresh is the Word podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us, man. We really appreciate it.
All right, cool. Like going into this, new album, what was sort of like your, what did you want to get out of doing, making this album?
It's a loaded question.
We're just getting to know each other right now. Are you sure you want to delve that deep though so quickly?
Hey, I just dive right in, man. You know what I'm saying?
Diving. We love diving. Well, if I may, we started 3 months before quarantine. We had a really killer first show about 3 weeks before quarantine, and then basically, music was sort of just an idea for a long time. People released stuff. I mean, it did what it was going to do there without being able to perform on it live. It had its advantages. It had its disadvantages. And I mean, as far as goals, I wrote most of these songs 2.5 years ago. So the goal is for people to hear Stud Count maybe for the first time, get the audience that we'd like to have, because I think everyone that's heard it so far seems to dig it. And I would like everybody else to hear it now too. That's really my only goal, is just getting ears on it and being able to go perform this live and, have a good time with the songs that we've sort of been pent up with for the last couple of years.
Yeah, everybody kind of came from different, bands, just that happens in every city. How did you guys all come together, and when was it let's be serious with this and make something that, that we can really put out on a real label?
Well, we met Brett at the bar Tattooed Moms on South Street after seeing Basement, I want to say, and
it was either Basement and Teenage Wrist or when they did the Failure Swerve Driver tour.
Yeah, there was a tour that came through, and we just went down to T-Mom's to hang out. And he was a friend of a friend, and so they're like, "Oh, this is Brett. He's a drummer," and we were like, "Oh, that's cool."
And with loose talk about getting something together, I was touring a lot in a band at the time, and you make tentative agreements to play music with people. When you've done it for an amount of time, it's never going to happen probably, but then when it if it ever does, you can say that you have been meaning to do this for a long time. So we made tentative plans to do something a little softer. I've been playing in hardcore punk bands since I was 12, 13 years old, which is a lot now of time. And so we just basically threw around the idea of doing something a little softer. But at the time, we'd been hanging out with a friend of ours in West Philly who ended up, playing bass for us, and we threw the idea together in the fall of 2019, and a few of us knew a kid who had just moved there from California named Max, and we all got together. We had our first couple practices, and yeah, I mean, Philly is honestly a city full of transplants, and I'm originally from closer to Manhattan, and Norelle is from Allentown, PA, and so yeah, I mean, it was kind of a melting pot of different people that we just kind of ended up meeting each other by happenstance.
How does sort of like that like melting pot of different people sort of, does it add to the creativity of Philly? How's that Philly scene like?
Well, I think it's very diverse. We have like subgenre scenes. Like it's not just one hardcore scene. You have like West Philly punk. You have like fast hardcore punk. Then you have like your like New York hardcore listener punk and metalcore as well. Like there's a lot of subgenre scenes in it.
And it's not even divided by genre. It's like it's divided by a crowd. And to be frank with you, in Philadelphia, it's measured by what they're willing to tolerate behaviorally. Now, I'm sure you know exactly what I mean. And,
right.
And to be fair, honestly, man, like I volunteered for This Is Hardcore for several years in a row, and like I got no smack to talk about any stretch of that scene. I mean, like Philly's a big city. There's a million people in it with a million different pockets. And I don't know. I don't think people moving there and not moving there means anything. I mean, there's a lot to offer, and it's kind of divided. But to say that it lends to the sound probably isn't true. I mean, like nobody moves to Philadelphia to make it. It's not Nashville or Los Angeles. It's a gritty mid-Atlantic city with a lot of different characters in it.
Like Gritty.
Like
The mascot.
The mascot Philadelphia deserves.
If you haven't seen him, look him up.
Oh no, I've seen him.
I just wanted to make sure.
Gritty looks batshit crazy.
I need to spend some time marinating on who Gritty is and why we deserve him.
Anyway.
Yeah, that's
another story.
That's a story.
That could take a whole other podcast session.
Right. So you started writing these songs before the pandemic. How did you just get through the pandemic with this music, or with this newly formed band? What was kind of going on in your head during this whole time?
Well, we kind of were very blessed during the pandemic because we had a core group of friends that we would hang out with. And so, we just kind of kept to ourselves because we had already been hanging out.
Right.
So when COVID hit, we were all like, what's happening? But we just continued to just stick together. And, if any of us traveled, we'd, stay apart for, a week or so, make sure no one was sick, and then, get tested or whatever, and then get back together and hang. And so we really just got to practice during that time and just hang and, create deeper bonds as bandmates, which was really cool. And the music, it sucked sitting on and waiting, but we were very blessed that right after quarantine, Smart Punk Records they picked it up. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. And I don't know, the city that we're living in and the music scene that I've been involved in one way, shape, or form for most of my life. It's not easy to be around. There's it's a music scene that prides itself on attracting sort of messed up people, right? And that's the sort of the beauty of it. If you were remotely familiar with the B9 era of hardcore, you probably heard a lot about it. But
I'm here in Detroit, so I get it.
A little meaner for sure.
Doesn't matter what genre of music, what you just said is true here.
Yeah. No, it's true everywhere, man. America, hardcore is this thing, right? This hardcore and punk thing. It's the whole point is that it attracts this sort of flawed the individual, and then it says something about unity. But the fun thing about unity is that it requires not just messed up people to be hanging out, but then somebody with some sort of foundation on which to hang out.
Right.
And like you don't get a bunch of orphans together and it's an orphanage, right? You need like staff. Right?
Yeah.
But hardcore doesn't have that, right? So it's like, so anyway, the point is like it's quarantine was really refreshing for me. Like I don't think I'd ever been more burnt out on music and punk and hardcore in my entire life when I started writing the Stuck Out demo. At the fall of 2019. So when quarantine hit, it felt like such a blessing. It didn't feel like a problem to me. And it gave me the time, we went to, we're married, and we went to my in-laws, her parents' house for a couple of months. And I don't know what it was like in Detroit, but in the Northeast, it really kind of seemed like the world was ending. Like maybe literally. Like everything was really shut down. People were scared,
Yeah.
It was, and so being in the mountains, we stayed there for 2 months.
It was nice.
I didn't have any work because Philly was closed, like closed.
Yeah.
And so we wrote. Honestly, it was the best thing that could have happened, giving us a year and a half of scene ambiguity, basically, like of nothing happening besides your friends and the music that you want to create. Taking time to write with one another once we figured out nothing was going to explode, and we tracked a promo tape with a mic or two in her parents' basement, and
it was very DIY.
It was very cool and punk rock of us.
I was just like dancing in my parents' basement with like a mic like wrapped around a pillar on top. And I'm just like on my toes, like yelling into this mic. It was great. I will forever cherish those memories.
Oh, definitely.
And then going upstairs and my parents being like, "How's it going?"
It worked out great. But basically, to answer your question, like it was amazing to get through that. I mean, the only thing that was kind of a bummer was the waiting and the ambiguity of it all. Like in my mind, like who will sign us? Why would somebody do an LP for a band that's never done anything before? Like why would? So one of my other bands, I play in a power violence band that a label called Convulse was nice enough to sign in the spring of 2020. And when I talked to him, I said, "Hey man, would you be willing to do physical tapes for the Stud Count demos?" And he was like, "Yeah, totally." And so he did. And so basically, we got those out. We got something of traction, tentative plans, and then I, being determined is a nice way to say it, very dumb is a more honest way to say it, polished off the writing for a full LP for Stud Count, recorded it over the course of a few weeks with a guy named Zach from New Jersey, who is the man that you should record with him if you ever get a chance. And I shopped it on a whim to maybe 5 labels. And Smart Punk was kind enough to sign it. So really, to answer your question, quarantine was the coolest thing that could have happened.
No, I get that, man, because when I was, like, during that time, it was nice to be away from certain people from the music scene here. It was nice to be away from a lot of things, and then how you saw musicians of all different types sort of deal with it during the you kind of saw who's real and who's not, who has real talent, who can do things with nothing. I kind of like I DJ, and I was exhausted from DJing. I hated DJing before the pandemic, and I kind of just fell back in love with it from like watching Twitch streams of certain DJ friends of mine, who were talking about the records and being so very like into the passionate about the music. So yeah, there was these great things creatively that came out of the pandemic.
Oh, totally, man. And also, wherever in Detroit, you gotta let me know if you're DJing some night. That's an art form all by itself, man. I gotta hear that.
Oh yeah. So, once you heard back that Smart Punk wants to sign with you, man, what was next after that? Because you had an album polished off and everything. What did you do after that?
Earl can definitely vouch for this. 6 weeks of deliberating whether or not to take the contract. Dude, I don't know if you have Jews in Detroit, but I am classic Seinfeldian overthinker guy. And I overthought more than anyone has overthought in their entire life is what happened next. And which is insane because Smart Punk is like a legacy label. The guy who I was talking to was super cool, and honestly, a much smaller label reaching out wanting to work with a full like vinyl record for us would have been cool. This was super cool. So I talked to my brother, who's like an agent in Hollywood, and like had him look at the contract. I had one of the guys from my church who was in like a really big metal band, and like he did all the contracts with them, look at it, and like
we were getting everyone to look.
We were getting everyone that has a real opinion about that kind of stuff.
To be fair, is what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, that's what you're supposed to be doing. Nobody, yeah.
You're supposed to be, here's my life.
All right. I lied. This is what happened. They sent us a contract, and I said, all right, sounds good. I'm not even going to read it. No, I'm just kidding.
You said I'm punk. I can't read.
I can't read, write, or do math. Come on now. And that was really it. I just, it was this crazy sort of pillar moment in my life where I was like, damn, Smart Punk, like the Less Than Jake people want to work with my band. This is very cool. So that's really it. I deliberated and overthought, not quite as hyperbolically as I just said, but I deliberated, sat on it, thought about it, processed, and talked to people I trust. And then we ultimately decided to go with it. They were not the only label that got back to us, by the way, of the 5, but they were certainly the coolest. So,
very blessed.
Yeah, that's really it.
What's sort of like the songwriting and recording process for you guys? Do you guys, kind of bounce things off of each other? Since she's the vocalist, you write songs. How do you sort of, do things?
So, Matthew has this really cool gift that he can hear entire songs and records in his mind. He will just like write a song in his mind and just have it, and then he'll have to explain it to our drummer. And they get each other. They have a language they speak. and Brett's like, oh, like this, and then they get it, and then they like Matthew will they would basically he'd go over to Brett's house. They would write a demo, demo it out on a phone, and then he'd bring it to me and like play it on acoustic guitar and be like, what do you hear over this? And so sometimes he'd have like an idea for a vocal rhythm, and I write the melodies, and I've written some of the lyrics for this LP. We kind of went back and forth on lyrics, but mostly it was just Matthew writing the bones of things, and then like Max wrote the leads. Brett figured out the drums with Matthew, but Matthew mostly wrote the whole thing, and then we all like added our parts to it. Pretty much.
Yeah, something I've learned with this band in particular, and this group of bands that I do now, I'm in 3 currently, is all with Brett, actually, our drummer, and one other with Norelle, is that the song, I get collaborative songwriting, but I really don't like it. Which I know maybe sounds like sort of like arrogant or difficult, like I'm some kind of diva, but I just like, that's just not my writing style. I mean, one time with Brett, awkwardly, I was like, well, when we were doing Drill Sergeant, Arabas band, we were writing the demo, I was like, well, do you just want to write? And we're here. I taught you the 4 songs I wrote yesterday. Do you want to try something else? And we tried, and he's like, sure, why not? And we did, and it was like, this is weird. And he was like, and he just said, yeah, come back tomorrow with the song already written, and we'll do it that way.
It works for Brett.
And that's the thing is sue me, but honestly, and this is a guy who's been touring and playing in bands for a lot of my life. Most good bands have 1 to 2 main songwriters, and that's it. That's all you need. You do not need a 4 or 5-way split of creative control. That gets sticky. It gets messy. It gets obnoxious. So yeah, what Norelle said, and then just to cap that off, I'll say like if 85% of the song is written before practice, it ain't gonna happen for me personally. So that's really it. We did that. Every band I'm in is kind of like that. I wrote it out, and maybe on my iPhone recorded an acoustic version of it so I wouldn't forget the riff.
And then we are thinking about, I have my own singer-songwriter stuff that's just called Norelle K. And we were thinking about giving some of my songs to our second LP, because they're very, like, Cranberries-esque, and we could add, like, a harder edge to them. So, we'll see.
We'll see what happens for LP2. I will say that I'm like dedicatedly keeping the songwriting between Norelle and I for the most part. These are sort of our babies as far as music is concerned. It doesn't mean I would say like no to a riff from the guys in the band. I just you know, it's just keeping it in the family. You know, that's keeps things well. Makes everything unsticky.
Not in a weird way.
Not in a weird way. Just in a functional way. We're keeping it clean. You know,
keeping it clean. Yep, clean and organized.
You get me? Thank you.
Yeah, I do. Okay, I have a question that someone posted on my Instagram. Amelius Black, that's her Instagram handle. She wants to know, what was the best part of your most recent tour?
Well, probably playing music with our friends. That's always the highlight. Like, even if the travel, it can be hard, or even if, like, everyone's tired or like whatever, but like really just hanging out with your friends and then playing music is like a high that like just you forget everything else. Like on the tour, you're just like,
yep,
doesn't matter. Like I might have had a headache, doesn't matter now. Like
for
we're playing music, whatever.
Yeah, I'll second that. I'll get that.
Rock in with your friends.
I mean, these were, like I said, we had one show before quarantine, and so coming back and like but this was our 2nd through 8th show is what happened. This tour was. So
I feel like I've met so many bands where they were like, yeah, we had one show, and then the quarantine hit.
I felt like we were reaching sort of like a housing bubble type situation underground when it came to like musical creativity. I mean, it was almost to the point where like hardcore didn't even care about hardcore bands anymore, and which is fair. If you've heard one, you've heard the rest for the most part. So this is a guy who loves hardcore and has been involved for a very long time. But we were reaching this sort of bubble where it was like people were just like almost hardcore almost wasn't having hardcore bands anymore. It was very strange. And so I think the quarantine actually popped that bubble. And so but so it makes a lot of sense that people were starting bands directly before quarantine. All work. But as far as this last tour is concerned, for me, it's like, yeah, I'll echo that. It was fun playing music, but like the reception for a band so new, and I'll be straight with you, as a person that obviously we know each other very well now. You and I were old friends, so you can hear about this. There was a lot of sort of shivs to overcome to get on to do this tour to begin with. I mean, like, one, we didn't know really all the details about the festival that we were playing. It was sort of the highlight of the tour. We were playing this thing called So What Music Festival. It was one of those nostalgia fests.
Yeah.
With some 41s and what have you on them. And we didn't really know what day we were playing. We didn't know when on the fest we were going to play. We didn't know even if we were going to play until about 3 months beforehand. And then what that caused us to have to do is sort of scramble tour. And that's nobody's fault, you know, but so that means that like we were gone for like 13 days and we only have 7 of those were show days.
Yeah.
So we were like show off the entire tour. But the coolest part was that our shows, like all but like 2 of them were like very, very cool. Yeah. Like we played in Little Rock, Arkansas. We did like a southern loop because we were playing in Dallas, right? That's like DFW area. And like Little Rock, Arkansas was one of the coolest shows I've ever played in my life. I mean, we sold so much merch. Like, I mean, we sold almost everything we brought with us, which is insane for a new band. But like, people,
it's cool merch. I got to say that, you know.
Thank you so much. You can totally thank Tad Martin and his One of Them team for the designs. I was I can't explain. You ever see like a raccoon try to paint a picture? It's like the same idea, trying to describe what I'm looking for in a design. But like, basically,
it's also very cute.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I'm glad somebody thinks so. The raccoons are very cute. No getting around that. But the point is that, like, I mean, at that show and like others, like, there was like it wasn't like just a hardcore tour at all. We're not a hardcore band, obviously, but it wasn't just the sort of hardcore adjacency that you might expect. I mean, people asked us to sign their merch more than once.
It was cool. This dad and daughter came up to me at the Arkansas show, and he's like, "Will you sign her shirt and take a picture with her?" And I was like, sure. Like that was really cool. And then like later on, the girl's uncle came up and was like, I want you to do the same thing. So he bought also the long sleeve and had me sign it. And I was like, okay, sweet. And then people that had followed me on Instagram for years came and saw our band. And that like blew my mind. Because I was like, the level of dedication you have to coming here and being here. Like, you didn't have to, but you came out. And like buying merch and just hanging out. Like, that was really cool.
Definitely. And so just to sum it up, basically, like, I've been in hardcore and punk bands for most of my life, and this is the first thing that's like, yeah, it's a punk band, but it's like not just a punk band. There's like power pop elements, there's stuff that, and like my whole life I've heard from my friends that play in maybe a little bit more mainstream sounding bands, like even if it's just pop punk or like metalcore or something, and they would refer to their touring as a career, and I was like, are you stupid? What do you mean your career? You're like not going to make money from this. And I realize now how rude that probably sounds. But the thing is, they were really, it is a career for them. And I'm just from a subculture that like needs to make money to survive, but refuses to make it unless you're like Prince or Terror. And and what I realized on this tour was like stuff like that is that like, it's not just people at the show that I want to make friends with, which is true. There's really an artist-fan relationship on this tour that was quantifiable. There were teenagers that came to some of our shows that, like, we were the coolest thing they'd ever seen. Yeah. To them, that's what they said. Like, people.
Several people told me they loved me.
Which is understandable.
Just like grabbing me by the shoulders and telling me while another band is playing. I was like, wow.
Yes. So basically, just like establishing, being treated like a real band was the coolest part for me. Apart from playing shows with my friends. I didn't realize how badly I missed touring until I hit my first note the first time. But yeah.
Being that you were, in these hardcore bands for so long and you're doing something that's a bit more softer, a little not so heavy, like do you ever get any like, blowback or any shade from like people that you knew from the hardcore scene about what you're doing now?
Well, yes,
for sure. I would if I hung out with them, probably. So, but I don't. So you know what I mean? I mean that with as much love as and respect as possible. But the sort of like secondhand closeness I have with most people from hardcore now, there's been a civil appreciation about what we're doing, and that's
plus most people think it's sick.
I mean, we have like songs that I would quantifiably say are hardcore. Like if you heard the whole record, you've heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, kids did mosh
a lot.
One of the shows.
More than one.
Actually, more than one.
Yeah.
Several.
Like.
So, because we do have some like the song "Push," it has kind of like a side to side part that's like just bass. Where you kind of just want to crawl.
Like you'd find in a brace war.
And I mosh on stage. Like I can't not. We all come from punk basically or hardcore, so it's like those elements are gonna be heard. Because like any band that's like us, that's not a hardcore band, but we come from those roots, you're gonna hear a little bit of it.
Yeah, like nobody's really called me a sellout yet, but or anything like that. But that's because people in punk and hardcore have been playing in melodic bands now for 25, 30 years. Yeah. I mean, it would be intellectually dishonest to like forget punk for a moment, because punk is literally just pop played by ugly Jews from New York, which of course, as myself as one, I'm very happy to hear that. But hardcore, which was basically, I'm sure hardcore, the whole point is that it's punk with all the fat sucked out twice the speed. That was the whole point. It's not punk, it's hardcore punk. There's a soundtrack of the sort of criminal lifestyle these guys were living. But from the first hardcore bands, the next band they did, those guys were Fugazi.
Yeah.
And Rites of Spring. And so there's been this trend of the guys, once they're done being pent-up adolescents, maybe they get a girlfriend or something, and then they start a more melodic band. I mean, that's why we have emo. That's why we have pop punk. That's why we have things like this. And so for me, I've never gotten any blowback, but if I did, I would assume these people were posers, because clearly they weren't paying attention to anything that happened in hardcore before. I mean, hell, you're from Detroit?
Yeah.
Remember you heard the Laughing Hyenas before?
Yeah.
Yeah, the guy from Negative, John Brandon's band afterwards, pretty much directly afterwards. It's,
right.
It's not a hardcore band.
Right.
So that is my personal view on it. You know, in recent history, we've had your title fights, we've had your culture abuse, we've had, you know, glitterer now from title fight.
Which is awesome.
We've even, if you go colder and more northern, you have cold cave, and you have the list goes on of guys and gals from hardcore doing cooler and more melodic
Well, you
stuff.
get the yelling out, and then you're like, wow, I'd really like to make something pretty.
Right. And then if you go over to, like, you know, Europe, go, you know, to the UK, you know, there's a lot more like younger bands that are, you know, they came from like a, you know, a hardcore, you know, scene, but they're doing something that's a lot more melodic while still having that kind of hardcore edge in it, you know. Like we were saying before, like how that bubble burst and like all these newer bands were coming out of the woodwork that were just like, hey, let's do something, like you said, a little bit more prettier.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing is, man, like that's the amount. Probably I have to tell you, you seem like you're a knowledgeable person. Like the first punk bands, the whole thing they wanted to do was be the Beach Boys. I mean, that's the
Right.
like, Ramones' whole background. I mean, the name Ramones, even for the Ramone, it comes from a pseudonym that Paul McCartney took when checking into hotels.
Right.
He was checking in as Paul Ramone. I mean, the biggest influences on the Ramones were the Beach Boys and the Beatles. Pop music is the backbone of punk. Anyone that disagrees is lying and also a poser. So.
Oh, right. Definitely.
You heard it here, folks.
Heard it here.
Make my
day. So, you know, before you were just kind of talking about like sort of being on tour, sort of like a breath of fresh air, how people were reacting. Is there anything else that you felt in the hardcore scene that was just like noticeably missing, that you really enjoyed that it was missing on this recent tour?
Oh no.
Girl, you can go first.
No, you go ahead.
There's something about hardcore punk that is both an advantage and a disadvantage, right? So I have friends that do hip hop, you know, I have friends that do lots of stuff. There's no opening level for stuff like hip hop. There's DIY hip hop and underground hip hop, but there's not like, hey, these kids from a new hardcore band, they're gonna go play a show and get their DIY wiggles out, and then they're gonna whatever, and then Joe will pay attention in Philly or something like that. There's not like that for other genres. But like what, you know, when I was in the last several bands I've had have had a really strong start. You know, like we've been really blessed. And so there was a band of mine in Philly, and we had we had a really strong first year and a half, and we got like the cosign like immediately. We played the after show for This Is Hardcore. You know, we got a record deal very fast, and there was a guy on like an interview that we were doing that asked me like, do you think that's like something that you guys earned? Do you think it's something about who you know? And that's the thing is, in hardcore, to answer your question, everything's who you know. That's the point of the music scene there, is that there's not like a fan and then artist thing going on.
Right.
There's stage and then audience thing going on. Everybody's both, everybody's everything. And there is no real division there. And so that's something that's cool about hardcore, but it's also like sort of one of hardcore's biggest flaws. Because, you know, if your whole music scene is rooted in a couple of important friendships that can come and go with the flip of a coin, then you don't really have anything at all, do you? You know, friendship is something that doesn't exist until it's tested. And so if it's all this sort of tenuous thing, somebody here's canceled on Twitter now, and this, that, and the other thing, and then somebody's entire band has to go away because they lost the approval of 3 guys that run a fest or something like that.
Yeah.
It's good to leave that stuff behind. And so I will say this, the egoism and the sort of weird, awkward clickiness that wasn't there was beautiful and refreshing. We played one quantifiably hardcore show on this tour, and we had a good time, but there was an air about it that was still weird. I mean, we had a great time. People seemed to enjoy our set, but it felt awkward, man. And there was too much posturing.
Right,
and
right.
To answer your question. Now, don't get me wrong. Every scene has its flaws. Hardcore is no exception, and it's not particularly bad in some way or another. But I certainly didn't miss that.
When when you were writing the material for this record, what were you drawing from? What were the stories or the lessons that you really wanted to share with on this record?
Yeah, sure.
Again, a loaded question. Because the subjects vary throughout all of the songs. And all of the lyrics were written at different times. It wasn't like we sat down and wrote, for me at least, when I songwrite and when I lyric write, it's like over time. But I think there's like several themes.
Sure.
The song Avenue, I was really, I guess, pressed in heart to write about like the opioid epidemic in Philly. That's what that's about, and just like crying out in the street for people to recognize that they have identity and they have worth, and them not knowing that, and just like overall, just the problem with drugs in America. So that's what that song's about, and then we have.
Yeah, we cover a lot of themes. I mean, like, there's a lot of relatability, I think, in a lot of it. I mean, there are songs that I wrote at one time that ended up meaning way more later on, too. I mean, like, a lot of the focus of this band is, I mean, like, a lot of the lyrics Norelle wrote, I promise, with no influence of mine, she wrote about being in love with me. And, I mean, hell, if I was on the mic, I'd probably be doing the same thing about her. I get it. We have a great marriage. Marriage is very nice, and it also slaps. But, so we have songs about that, falling in love. We have songs about people being people,
and like broken
friendships. And
Willow's about people letting you down. And I don't know.
There's a lot of social theme in that, and that's really it, man. I mean, like, there's not a whole lot of. This band is sort of quantifiably unpolitical, but we cover a lot of really the rest of it. Social interactions and friendships and relationships and things you'd want to process if you, for some reason, had 2 years off from being able to play music live, which hopefully never happens again.
Right. What do you hope your listeners get out of listening to this album?
I mean, I personally hope that they don't feel so weird and alone. I mean, I think that we live in a pretty narcissistic time right now, like as a whole. I think people are really self-obsessed right now in a way that maybe they've never been or hasn't been as amplified. And I hope that hearing songs about moving on and recovering from super messed up friendships and, or even honestly on the other side of the coin, hearing about marriages that work and are, like hearing that the classic arrangement of a husband and wife loving each other and laying one another's lives down for each other actually works out and is good and has joy and happiness. I hope that they realize that. I hope that hearing it, one, they're having fun, and that they realize that if they come up to us at a gig, that we're probably gonna make friends. Two, that they are able to make the individuals in their thought process. Ironically, in a very sort of progressive time that we're living in, what should be a very individualistic time has actually just sort of pendulum swung the other direction in herd mentality. And I hope that people realize they can think for themselves as well. That maybe they don't feel so weird if, say, they ended up on the crappy end of a social situation or a breakup. That's my personal hope. Or specifically with the song about opioids, that they see a glimmer of hope if they're trapped with addiction.
Yeah.
Oops. Sorry, I don't. But okay, yeah. So as we wind this interview down, wait, hold on, just one moment. It looks like I'm freezing up here. Wait a minute.
It happens to the best of us. too much caffeine. I'll tell you that much.
Going really fast.
I'm going so fast right now. Hey, he's not lagging anymore.
All right, here we go. Okay, as we wind down this this interview, what's next for you guys? The album's about to come out. After a couple years, this pandemic, what's next?
Well, what I'm finding out is that we gotta go tour now. So we're talking about another week or 1 to 2 weeker, different part of the country at the end of the year. Right now we have the next single for the record comes out on Friday. Has a video with it. Then a month later there will be the final single, and then the record. And for us, it's just like, this record's out. I think it will speak for itself. We're gonna play on it, and my hope is that bands that we like right now will pay attention as well, and we can do some touring together. All the bands that we intersected with, we were really lucky on this tour. But I liked pretty much everyone we played with. So yeah, that's really what's next, man. Playing and letting this record marinate with the public. Maybe a little bit of writing.
Awesome. You guys are so cute together. It's awesome to see like a married couple in a band, and it's awesome.
Thank you.
Can I just agree with you? Yeah, I also think we're super cool.
I'm so glad.
Aw.
God, I don't know what age I hit where I think I'm hilarious, but this is terrible. I'm so sorry.
He acts like a dad a lot, and I look around for our children because it's just so much dad vibe going on that I'm like, I have to have children right now. I don't know where they are.
They're here. They're in spirit. The kiddos are here. I don't know. I don't have kids. I don't know what age I hit. I think it was 22. I just officially. People in various scenes just thought I was basically their dad suddenly, and I was like, my friend, I am college age. Are you sure?
And even when he gives somebody advice, he'll go, I'm not your dad, but...
Listen, I'm not your dad, but...
you should not do that, or you should do this.
Yeah.
Like, he'll tell them, and they'll be like,
and here's the
right.
thing, I'm actually right, for sure.
Play down. You just tell him how it is. I'm proud of it.
I'm so sorry. Anyway, I'm not sorry. That's not true. But yes, dude. Yes, thank you. I appreciate it.
It's all good. And for the music nerd that's in me, like, do you guys still have any of those tapes that you pressed up years ago?
Well, Convulse absolutely sold out of all of theirs, so no. I don't know if we'll ever redo tapes.
We also just sold out of all of our vinyl.
Yeah, we.
But we're getting the new ones.
But we're getting the new ones.
And they're really cool.
And maybe Smart Punk would want to do a tape release of this.
Oh, that would be fun.
People like tapes. People like.
Yeah.
They're really cool. Yeah.
People like stuff. I like that stuff. We did a lathe cut, which is really cool. I much prefer it to a flexi. Yeah, to answer your question, probably I don't think we have any left at all. They sold out immediately.
But we could in the future.
But we could in the future. Time will tell. Which I'm positive will go on my headstone. But,
Time will tell.
Will tell. That and I just work here.
It's been great talking with you both. Good luck with everything. Please let everybody know where they can go online to get more information about Stud Count.
So we're on all streaming platforms. Like, these singles are dropping on streaming sites for Friday. I know an Australian one called Punctuation, but with a K. It's very clever of them. Is doing premiere in Australia, and then there's a feature on Friday in the US under noecho.com, so you can read those, you can hear some stuff, and then everything's on Spotify and YouTube. Both the single that dropped Through My Window in May, and then also the one that drops on Friday. Those are available on YouTube. They have music videos that go with them, so you can go find those if you want to see what we look like wearing sunglasses.
Or driving a
vintage
T-Bird.
T-Bird. We got to drive a T-Bird. And
also, we're on Instagram at Studcount USA.
And Twitter, which we were forced at gunpoint to make by
now we have
So we have a Twitter, and that's just at Studcount.
Great.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks again for having us, by the way, man. This was
you.
a real pleasure, and please don't be a stranger if we're ever in Detroit, and if you're ever in Philly or East Tennessee, where we live most of the time.
Okay. I'll keep that in mind, man. Yeah, it's been great talking with you. Like I said, cute couple, love it.
Thank you.
God is good.
It's good.
All right, y'all have a good day.
You as well, man. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you for listening to the Fresh is the Word podcast, hosted and produced by myself, Kelly K. Fresh Frazier, empowered by Anchor at anchor.fm/Fresh is the Word. Fresh is the Word theme music provided by Steve O. You can find more of his productions at iamsteveo.bandcamp.com, and that's EYEAMSTEVEO.bandcamp.com. Fresh is the Word is available on all major streaming platforms. Please rate and review on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher. If you want to support Fresh is the Word, please consider pledging via Patreon at patreon.com/freshastheword. Follow Fresh is the Word on social media on Twitter at Fresh is the Pod, on Instagram at Fresh is the Word Podcast, and join the Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Fresh is the Word. For more information about Fresh is the Word and our other podcasts, Breaking Records and Renaissance Soul, and a collection of pop culture articles and reviews, please visit freshasthepodcast.com. Thank you for listening and your support. Goodbye and good night.
Fresh is the word.